Zimbabwe is talking tough again, and this time the financial sector could feel the whip is found guilty. Zimbabwe has threatened to ban traders from the country's forex auction platform for taking advantage of the price gap between the black markets and official currencies. The Deputy Finance Minister, Clement Chidwa, says authorities are addressing an underground phenomenon that could completely destabilize the Zimbabwean economy. Businesses and individuals may face a fine of 1 million Zimbabwean dollars and a total ban. Authorities are concerned that traders may be getting foreign currency through the Zimbabwe Reserve Bank's auction system and selling it at high prices. The deputy minister said the auction system is subject to rampant abuse and that government is trying to minimize arbitrage opportunities, protect consumers, and provide companies with a fair, competitive auction. I'm Tolulakwe Adileru Balogun. Welcome. This is Business Edge. Joining me from Johannesburg for today's show is Ikos Akpovayan. He's the Chief Investment Officer Ovid Capita, where he manages the company's investment portfolio and leads the investment strategy unit. Ikos, it's good to see you again. Thank you so much for joining me on Business Edge.
Good to see you too, Tolu.
Let's start with setting the stage for how Zimbabwe, through multiple attempts to regulate currency, to settle its economy, got to this situation where the Reserve Bank is now running an auction system, which is meant to sell foreign exchange to individuals and companies. So how did we get to this point concerning Zimbabwe?
Look, Zimbabwe is really a sad story. It's a story where I think countries who make mistakes in their economy, and this has been going on for a long time, should learn from it. Zimbabwe has a lot of sanctions. Zimbabwe cannot export. Zimbabwe is not producing like it's supposed to produce. Its agricultural industry was in shutters many years ago. And Zimbabwe is suffering hyperinflation. And the government has been trying to revive the currency. So for me, with this news, you know, these are things that happen, is having the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe against the market. And you never win because the market is usually bigger.
It's interesting you say that. It's the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe against the market. So the gap between the official and the parallel market rates has widened to as much as 130 Zimbabwean dollar per $1 US. Although authorities have maintained the rates at about 84.76. What are the implications of this gap between the official rates and the parallel markets, which we all know in this situation is basically the black market?
Exactly. In countries where you see the black market thriving is when there's a gap, and this is in demand. So you see the market is demanding US dollar to do trade, and more exporters and more business people are looking for US dollars to do their business, and it's not in demand. And so you have the government providing it, the Reserve Bank subsidizing it, and it's not enough. So what you see, there will be a market that thrives. So for example, if a company should get for one price, a lower price, which is about 83 Zimbabwe dollars to US dollar, and there's no demand for it, there will be no need usually in the market. But it shows clearly here that there's market forces, there's huge demand from the market in Zimbabwe and this is creating that vacuum, an opportunity for the black market to thrive. So and there are better ways. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead, finish. I beg your pardon.
There are better ways, of course, to tackle this. I know the government is worried. The Deputy Finance Minister has mentioned that this will cripple the economy, and the President has echoed this before. But of course, there are underlying issues that need to be tackled in Zimbabwe head on. But maybe we'll get to that just in a few minutes.
All right, and that's actually where I'm going now. So as you said, the Deputy Finance Minister is saying that this is a situation that is capable of destabilizing Zimbabwe's economy. How dire, on a scale of 1 to 10, if you're saying 10 is the worst case scenario, how bad is this situation with the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe's auction system that is so capable of destabilizing what we might have to say is already a destabilized economy as it may be?
Zimbabwe economy has been a crippled economy. Recently, there was news about lack of foods in the shelves and goods in the shelf. Of course, you can see this massive corruption in government. Companies that are in the auction are companies that are being favored, and there's a huge deficit of and huge demand of foreign currency. So you have to tackle the corruption. You have to tackle the underlying issues. You have to tackle the sanctions. And you must remember that a lot of atrocities were committed by the previous government. We understand Robert Mugabe was an hero on different quarters, but this problem started during his regime. And the ZANU-PF has not really shown that, they want to make the kind of change the international community is calling on. And so those sanctions are still biting, and it's being transferred to the poor and the weak in the society, in the country.
All right, so let's look at how traders are actually taking advantage, because that's what we've been hearing a lot of, that the traders are taking undue advantage. There's arbitrage. You've mentioned corruption as well. This cannot be happening without civil servants in the central bank system, in the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe as well, being party to some of this. But what's the undue advantage? What's the situation where traders are being able to do more than they should, or taking more money than they should, and then reselling at the black market? Is it just as simple as they have access and others don't?
Exactly. I thought you must have picked that from what I said. Of course, it's simple. You have access, you meet the criteria through connection, through corruption, and not a lot of the other part of the economy and the society have that access. And when you go through those stringent access and you claim you want to purchase a US dollar for your imports, and there's a huge opportunity just to sell it around the corner. I mean, we've seen it in many countries. It's not, you don't need a rocket scientist to tell you this. There's a huge gap. There's corruption. There's nepotism. There's opportunity for few companies who have access and who can meet the stringent criteria. By the way, Zimbabwe is one of the worst countries in the continent to do business in a business ranking. So it's very difficult. And all these red tapes have been put in there, and it creates corruption. It makes the situation dire. And this is some of the results you're seeing.
All right, so I want to address a few criticisms that the auction system has. But before I do that, I need to ask, if this system was working the way it was intended, if the corruption was minimalized, if people were not accessing the foreign exchange through the back doors or using their connections, is this a good opportunity? Is this a good system for Zimbabwe to use? If all things being equal, things were working the way they should have been working.
If we go back to all things being equal, Zimbabwe will not be in that situation in the first place. It's not been a very good situation. At one time, the Zimbabwe economy was using the US dollar as a legal tender, legally. Right now, it's mostly for import and those trying to do business outside the country, and there's a lot of import. So when you see if things are working normally, at one other time, the Zimbabwe economy was using the South African rand, and they had the government had to step in. The point is there's been hyperinflation. The Zimbabwe dollar could not survive, and people don't want it. They don't see a future in that currency. And if things are being put right, the sanctions have been lifted, the list of things international community, the IMF want to see, if those things have been done, then a lot of these problems will be in the back, and we can see Zimbabwe coming back to the giant it was. Zimbabwe was a food continent, and it's a shame what we're seeing in Zimbabwe.
All right, so Ikos, I want you to hold on. We're going to take a break now. When we come back, we will look at some of the criticisms of the auction system. If those issues are addressed, could this help Zimbabwe get back to the path of economic recovery? We'll also look at what needs to be done to help what was one of Africa's most promising economies. Stay with us. And we continue our conversation looking at Zimbabwe's foreign exchange issues. Now, this auction system that's run by the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe was one of the latest attempts the country had to stem a years-long foreign currency crisis. And that crisis has deepened an overall sense of economic fear and instability. But almost from the beginning, it has faced criticism. There are those who say the weekly auction excludes small and medium-sized enterprises, which account for more than 90% of Zimbabwe's economy. The Zimbabwe National Chamber of Commerce at one point said that the auction needs to be ripped away from the RBZ's clutches to win full credibility. Ikos, what do you think about that, particularly coming from the Zimbabwe National Chamber of Commerce? They don't seem to be fully against the auction system, but they're saying that it needs to be removed from the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe's control clutches in order for it to be credible and run well. What are your thoughts on that, especially also given, as we spoke about earlier, that small and medium-scale businesses seem to be basically unable to access the foreign exchange they may need?
Yes, look, that's one step. I agree with the Chambers of Commerce recommendation. Once you put in the Reserve Bank, the access is very few. But I'm not sure how much US dollar, the quantity the Reserve Bank can get. But this kind of auction should be done by commercial banks and not the Reserve Bank.
All right, so let's follow up on that. The auction system, as we mentioned a bit earlier, also has a so-called priority list, which includes businesses that offer essential goods and services, such as imported raw materials, fuel, basic foodstuffs, mining, and medical consumables. Do you think that this high priority list is still in play, or it's sort of been pushed to the side depending on who you know and who you have access to? Does the priority list itself actually lend itself to the success or to the corruption in the system right now?
Look, with experience, the lists are always guidelines that have been put by, the officials who draft this kind of system. But when you get approved for your auction, we don't know what goes behind. Obviously, when there's corruption and the system is broken down, the system doesn't work that it should work. These kinds of things are just on paper. I doubt they're really working, and those industry lists are being followed. I doubt.
So then if Zimbabwe wants to address this and address the abuse issues, what exactly is the plan? So we've heard from the Deputy Finance Minister that there's a fine in place and there's going to be a total ban if you're caught. We'll get into what you think about that. But before you can catch people, you tighten up the system, you clean the system, you make sure that there are no loopholes. Is there a stated plan right now that the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe or Zimbabwe's economic minders have in play to clean up this auction system?
I don't think there's a plan. It's just government coming back to say we're going to ban anyone and give a fine. That's what we're hearing now. But when this had been done by your cronies and been done by the same people that are connected to people in power, I don't see this working. Just like the recommendation, one way to try to push this kind of system is to take it to the commercial banks. If it's riddled with corruption and nepotism, and companies who have privilege and who are strong, and not small and medium companies having access, of course, you know what it means. And the system will never work. And most times, we say all the time, as much as possible, government is there to enable. Government is not supposed to be involved in businesses. This should be done by the commercial banks.
So is bringing the commercial banks in the only way to clean up the system? Is there any other way to clean up the system?
Look, one of the ways to clean up the system, first of all, is corruption. You need to, once you take that, you reduce corruption, you reduce access. Obviously, right now, there's less access to the companies that need this, needs US dollar. And there's a fight between the market forces, the demand and the supply. And that's why you're seeing this system being compromised the way it has been set up. So I also doubt this a true way the government wants to clean up the system, because it's a way for bigger companies just to make money.
So let's look at the fine and see what ECOS thinks about this. So we're hearing from the Deputy Finance Minister of Zimbabwe that if you are caught, the fine is 1 million Zimbabwean dollars. That comes to about 160,000 rand. And you will remember, as ECOS mentioned earlier, there was a point in time that Zimbabwe was using the rand as legal tender. But all of that comes to just over $2,700. So ECOS, these punishments, the fine and the potential of a total ban from the auction system, do you think they serve as enough deterrence from those who are right now taking undue advantage, almost illegal advantage of this auction system?
Personally, from experience, if there were small companies, these fines will deter them. But obviously, as we can clearly see, the companies taking advantage and trading, having access to this auction, they're not just the smaller companies, they're the biggest companies. So this fine is, for me, it's nothing. I mean, it's nothing to the amount of profit that could be made. I mean, if you look at the margins from the black market and the margins from the auction, there's a lot of profit there to be made. So I don't see that to deter those big companies and the kind of profit they're currently making or they can make currently. So this fine is nothing when you get in high volumes. This is nothing.
All right, so now what are the solutions? Because is there anything that the government can do to make this better? The government dumped the one-to-one rate in February 2019 and launched the RTGS dollar, which encompassed other local denominations. It also created an exchange rate for banks, known as an interbank rate, to tame currency fluctuations. Officials hoped that the move would lure Zimbabweans away from the parallel markets, which flourished amid the currency crisis. Finally, in June 2019, the country's central bank, that is the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, ditched the multi-currency system and set up a new local currency as the only legal tender. Yet shortages of foreign currency have persisted, an urgent problem in a landlocked country that relies heavily on imports. ECOS, has there been anything that the country has tried that has seemingly pushed it forward in terms of making economic progress? Or has every move sort of been, we go to this corner, it's not working, let's reverse and try something else? What is there happening right now in Zimbabwe that seems to say, okay, there is still light at the tunnel, coming from the years of hyperinflation, hitting records that the world had never seen before?
Look, the rebase of the Zimbabwe dollar was a step forward, but you can see where it reaches now already. In just about 2 years, it's already getting out of hand. And so the Zimbabwe government has to look at the underlying issue. One of the big underlying issue is direct foreign investment. The FDIs needs to come into Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe has to reform. Zimbabwe has to show justice and those people that were murdered. And those are some of the recommendations. And it needs to work very hard to meet the criteria so that sanctions can be lifted. Zimbabwe can start exporting. Zimbabwe can revitalize its agricultural industry, which was made the breadbasket of Africa. If you keep running away from those issues, the change, we're just going to be scratching the surface. And these kind of things will continue. Because the one reason you need dollars, just like you said, is because of your import. But you can balance that with your own exports. And you can balance that with your FDIs that come into the country. If those things are not happening, we'll continue to see high demand of needing foreign currency for imports. And these kinds of things we continue, is going to get worse.
Is there the political will to make the necessary changes and I guess we'd also say sacrifices for this?
It's a very difficult one. It's a quite difficult one because the problem lies because most of the people who enabled the former president, Robert Mugabe, are the ones behind. And that system still holds. And the political will has been very slow. And we have seen that in the last 3 years or more.
All right, Ikos Epuvaye, we'll leave it at that for now, and I'm very sure we will touch back with Zimbabwe as we watch how things play out. My guest has been the Chief Financial Officer of Ovid Capital, joining us from Johannesburg, South Africa. Ikos, we'll see you again soon. All right, you are, of course, watching Business Edge, and we'll be wrapping things up. Just a quick timeout, and I have NC4 to watch for you. And let's wrap things up the way we normally do, and that's giving you a few stories we're keeping our eyes on. This is NC4 to watch on Business Edge. We start in Nigeria, where the Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria has unveiled bird equipment, also known as wildlife management equipment, at its headquarters annex. Now, the Airports Authority inaugurated the equipment at its Lagos office in a bid to improve flight safety operations and regulate the occurrence of bird strikes at the nation's airports. The World Bank has listed Nigeria among the 3 countries with the largest electricity deficits in the world. It said during the last decade, a greater share of the global population gained access to electricity than ever before. But the number of people without electricity in sub-Saharan Africa increased. And if you want to know more about this, we had a conversation on this on Business Edge. You can check it out on our YouTube channel. Egypt's Minister of Planning and Economic Development, Hala El Said, has met with the European Union ambassador in Cairo, Christian Berger, and is accompanying his delegation to discuss methods of enhancing joint relations. Now, during the meeting, the minister briefed the ambassador on Egypt's structural reforms, noting that the government was committed to following up the second phase of the economic reform program. This came as part of efforts to create new job opportunities, improve the business climate, and enhance local industries. And finally, the number 4 on our NC4 to watch. According to the Bank of Uganda, the country's COVID-19 credit relief scheme gave out at least 7.7 trillion Ugandan shillings for the period ended 2020. However, during the same period, the central bank noted at least applications worth 200 billion Ugandan shillings were not approved, which means they did not qualify to benefit from the credit relief scheme. And that's our show for today. As always, thank you so much for joining us. You can catch us again 11 a.m. West African time as we take you through the business, financial, and economic conversations happening on the continent. Don't forget to follow us on social media at News Central TV. You can also head to our YouTube channel, download our mobile app on your Google Play Store or the Apple App Store, and follow us, of course, on our other channels. We are on Star Times Live 274 and Avo TV channel 23. I'll see you again soon. Have a good one.